So what we need to create is basically a register that will store the data of that specific sensor. So imagine that now, instead of having a register for that specific input, we're now going to have a queue, right? So a queue is a data structure in software that allows you to basically discard the latest value and then push the current value at the start or at the end, depending on how you program it. And so here, instead of going into the register, I'm also going to send this into the top register over here. And of course, I'm going to push down all the other values to the bottom. So what does this look like in practice? So let's say that I have the sensor 0, 0, 0. So this is in the current state. And then I'm going to start with 0. As soon as the sensor triggers, right, so again, it's important to keep the timeline in place. So imagine that this is 0 milliseconds, so 0 milliseconds. This is the current state. At 5 milliseconds, so the PLC cycles through again, and the sensor is currently set to 1, right? So the sensor is high, something that is in front of the sensor, it is set to high. At 10 milliseconds, once again, the sensor is set to high, but remember, we need to push all of this down to our register. So now this 1 goes over here, and so I'm going to have this current state of the sensor. At 15 milliseconds, the sensors go low, but remember, we're going to push all of this down. I'm going to have 1, I'm going to have 1, and I'm going to have 0. And so what I'm illustrating here is that basically, instead of now looking at a single point in time, we are now looking at an array of the state of your sensor, which is going to be at 0, 5, 10, and 15. So as an aggregate, right? So if I create a structure that is able to save a lot of those states and then I absorb that value at a 1 second interval, I can then decipher that entire array and understand what the value was of that sensor at the scan time of the PLC. Now, let's look at into something more complex, right? So we've talked about a sensor that's only going to be set to 1 or 0. You're going to be reading also a lot of tank levels. So when you're reading a tank level, right, so you're going to have, for example, a sensor here that's going to be looking at an analog value, and you're going to have a fill of a specific tank. This could be a liquid, this could be, of course, a solid. It is not extremely important based on, again, tanks don't fill really quickly based on my experience,